Hey everybody, this is Joel Toppin, and this is the first video in a series I'm going to do on my new game design entitled Navajo Wars, A History of the American Southwest, 1595 to 1864. This is a game I started designing about a year ago. It's a solitaire game where the player plays the Navajo Tribe. So what I would like to do in this first video is just kind of walk through the basic mechanics of the game, what the game's about, how certain things work. First of all, the map, as you can see here, this is the map board. Now in Vassal I've created some extra space below where the player can play his cards. But the map itself here is going to be on a standard 22 by 34 inch map sheet. It's comprised of a couple different things. First, the map space itself. Here is where all the action is going to take place vis-a-vis the Navajo tribe and its enemies. And it's divided really into 6 different areas with one special area in the center. We'll go through those areas one by one. Each area on the map consists of 6 raid boxes which are numbered beneath the raid box. And the raid boxes, you can tell, have an image from that particular area in the Four Corners area of the American Southwest. Now the first area is Shiprock. You'll see that it has a victory point value. There's a die roll symbol with a die roll face. There are 2 boxes here where a drought marker could be placed. At the beginning of the game, there's no drought on the map. And then there are 6 raid boxes, and there is a family counter here in box number 1. Now the raid boxes, you may notice, have 2 numbers underneath them. There is a parenthesized number, which is only used whenever specifically told to do so by the rules or charts. Okay? Otherwise, you always use the unparenthesized raid box value. So that's the first area, and it's the area closest to New Mexico where the enemy is going to be coming from. The enemy generally comes out of Santa Fe, strikes into your land from there, and the enemy is going to be following these connecting point-to-point lines into your land. Second area is San Juan Valley. The victory point value, is a little bit lower than the Shiprock area. It's 2 victory points here, but that's because it's a little bit further from Santa Fe and therefore a little harder for the enemy to access and therefore easier for you to control. Again, there's 6 raid boxes. Family B, I decided to start him here in the 3 box. The die roll face here is a 2. Now, you may notice this already, but each area has a different die face. So there are 6 areas, each with a different face of a 6-sided die. The idea there being that you're going to be doing things throughout the game where you're going to roll a die to find out which area of the map is impacted by that particular event. So this will help facilitate establishing which area gets hit with a certain event or occurrence. So the area number 3 is going to be the Zuni Mountains, and then you have area 4 up here, Monument Valley. Area 5 is the Hopi Land. Area 6 is Black Mesa, which you may notice does not have a victory point value. It's the furthest area from Santa Fe, the easiest one to hide out in. You don't get any victory points for doing that. Center area only has 3 boxes. There are no raid space, or drought spaces here for Canyon de Chelly, and there are also no die roll faces for this. Canyon de Chelly is something like a refuge area. It's kind of a safe haven where you're relatively safe from the enemy. It's very difficult for the enemy to penetrate Canyon de Chelly for a number of different reasons. And also, from Canyon de Chelly, the players' families have a special ability to be able to jump to any raid box on the map. Conversely, a family on any raid box on the map can immediately jump to any raid box inside Canyon de Chelly. So that's Canyon de Chelly's function. There are connecting lines from Hopi Land and Monument Valley, so the enemy could enter Canyon de Chelly, but it's usually very difficult for them to do so because they're going to try to find all your people outside the canyon before they'll try to pursue inside the canyon. Moving along the map, your families are going to move from point to connecting point, and as they move, they'll spend movement points that correspond to the raid box values. So if your family doesn't have horses, it's going to cost 5 movement points to move into this box, 6 to move into this box, and the idea there being that as you move further into an area, each area is an abstraction of the type of topography and terrain in that particular area. And so the further back you move in a particular area, the more remote part of that particular area you are entering. So it becomes harder for you to travel, but it also becomes harder for the enemy to come after you. So it's easier to hide out far back here, but it's harder for you to get anything done that you need to get done. You can't plant corn and stuff way back in these dark recesses of canyons and mesas. So that's how the families are going to be moving. Now the parenthetical value here, in parentheses, that's the value, that's how many movement points it costs if you have horses in your family unit. At the beginning of the Spanish period here that I have set up, none of the families actually have horses. So you'd have to actually use the unparenthesized raid box value to move from point to point. And again, you can always use the jump to Canyon de Chelly, but that costs you all your movement points to do that. So that's the map. Around the map, there's a number of tracks and displays, the most important of which is the military and culture tracks. If these markers both reach 0 at the same time, if they're both at 0, the game instantly ends and the player loses. So your goal is to keep these both above 0. If one falls to 0 and the other doesn't, you don't lose, but there are severe penalties if any one of those markers is on the 0 box. The AP's track is where you track how many action points the player has at any given moment. Start the game off with 3 action points. And the general records track is just a convenient place where you can track how many movement points a family has spent. You know, if you're playing the game, phone rings or something, you got to pause. This is just a convenient place where you can mark things like that. Down here is the out of play box where you put all the pieces that are not presently in play. There is a family display, a population display that consists of 8 family boxes, each of which have a letter identifier. So you have family A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so forth. Families can be represented on the map as long as they have at least one adult counter inside them. And each family can accommodate 1 man, 1 woman, and 1 child. Man and women are collectively referred to as adults. Children, if you have 1 child in a family but no adults, then the family's counter would have to stay down here in the family box until an adult would be placed in that family, at which point it could then enter the map at Canyon de Chelly. So you can see at the beginning of the game we have families A, B, and C on the map. Families D through H have not been able to enter play yet. We'll talk more about that in a future video. There's also an elder display where you track the status of your elders, which are very important pieces in the game. There's a space for passage of time where resources that are out of play temporarily are basically stowed in here until the player undertakes a particular operation known as passage of time, at which point they enter play. There's a box for tribal raid markers, so when hostile tribes come against you, their markers are going to be temporarily stored in here as the raid progresses. The resources box is where the player places his resources that can be used by any of the families. So as you accumulate resources, you'll hold them in here. All of the things that drive the enemy's actions are stored on the right-hand side of the map, including an out-of-play box where the enemy's pieces are stored, a box for subjugation of the pueblos, raided cubes box, recovery box. These are all things that impact the enemy and its capabilities. The enemy's instruction display, located here, is the brainchild of how the enemy works. This drives what the enemy does to hurt the player. And we'll talk more about this one in detail in our next video. So that's the map. Next video, what we'll do is we'll talk about the cards, the counters, and then we'll start to show how this game actually plays.